But anyway, let's start talking about the actual show that we were going to talk about, which is not a show.
No.
It is a beautiful, wonderful game that first came out in 1998 on the Nintendo 64. It's my favorite game on that console for sure. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It's constantly switching back between first and second. It's just in a perpetual battle with Mega Man X for the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
We're talking, of course, about a bear and his Breagle. We're talking about Banjo Kazooie,
Yep. Banjo Kazooie.
made by
Classic.
Rare.
Made by Rare. Very classic action 3D platformer. From like really the golden age of platformers, I think. Like the mid to late 90s was, on both the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation was the age of the platformer. And Banjo Kazooie was definitely in the top of that. I would say it's probably my favorite platformer of all time.
Yeah, hands down.
Not my favorite game on the console because I'm a huge Zelda fan, so Zelda was always my number one. But Banjo Kazooie was definitely top 5 for me.
Zelda is in my top 3 for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, a great, amazing game, and a game that is so weird. Like you would never think it would have worked the way it did, because it was, almost like Disney-like in the way the characters were. It's almost like going on like Splash Mountain. Like that's the kind of characters there are.
Without the racism, but yes.
Yes, yeah. And just overall a great game, and a game that like still holds up today. Like you could pick it up now in 2021, literally 23 years after the game came out, and it's still good. And not only that, the comedy and is still good. It's still funny. Like the jokes are hilarious, and they hold up today. 21 years later.
Like I loved how there's just innuendos after innuendo after innuendo.
Oh, yeah.
And it's it's just like a game for everybody.
It is.
But
it's
like
great.
the concept just is very is what makes the game weird. It's not like it's not necessarily that it's a platform game where like you're a bear. Like, all right, that like it's a video game, sure. There could like Mario is a plumber that goes to fight a dragon that saves a princess from a castle,
right?
And like there's mushroom people living in the kingdom. That's weird on its own, but everybody knows about that one. Everybody knows about Banjo-Kazooie too, but it's not as like I'd say it's not as like, they're not like the figurehead of Nintendo.
No, Super Mario 64 is definitely, I think, in terms of objectively, it's probably the top platformer. I'm sure it sold more than Banjo did, because Banjo-Kazooie was a little bit more. I mean, again, Rare was a big publisher then, but a lot of the the Nintendo games were like kind of took center stage, like the Nintendo only IPs, so like Mario, Zelda, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, and so like when Rare made, I think, the best Nintendo 64 games. Again, aside from Zelda, like, you had Banjo-Kazooie, Jet Force Gemini, Donkey Kong 64, Killer Instinct Gold. Like, there was so many good Rare games that were on the Nintendo 64.
Well, they had hit after hit after hit.
It was like,
and then you have Conker's Bad Fur Day, which we could talk about on another episode too.
Yeah,
but that was also just. It wasn't necessarily a hit because it kind of came at the end of the console's life, so it was like kind of put in a weird spot. Conker's Bad Fur Day, and also it had an M rating, but it was still like that is worth talking about in another episode by itself.
Yeah, and it's interesting the way Banjo-Kazooie came around, because Banjo started out as a character. He was one of the side characters in Diddy Kong Racing, one of the characters that you could play as in Diddy Kong Racing.
Right.
And so was Conker. So, Rare kind of had this cast of characters that they wanted to use. And like I don't know if they planned on making more of those Diddy Kong Racing characters have their own series, or if it was just going to be
Well,
always
there was
Banjo and
supposed to be
Conker.
another Diddy Kong Racing for the GameCube that like in the initial GameCube launch trailer there was like a demo that had what would have been a Diddy Kong Racing sequel that and it just never happened for some reason. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if it had anything to do. I'm not sure if it happened around the time that like Microsoft bought Xbox. So like
It
then
probably was about the
it may
or
have been.
Rare, yeah.
I'm not really
Yeah, because
sure.
Microsoft bought Rare in the early 2000s because what was that Grab by the Ghoulies was on the original Xbox, and I think that came out in
Yeah,
2002 or
that game's
2003.
that game I think is really underrated. Like I've played it. It actually is a pretty fun game.
I've never actually played it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's not bad, and it has like that kitschy little like grab by the ghoulies thing in the
yeah,
beginning.
yeah.
The intro kind of cracks me up.
But yeah, I mean, and you think about Rare also had the GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, which
Yeah,
their versatility as a game developer, it was crazy
yeah.
because they're making games like platform games like Banjo Kazooie that are kind of cute and for more for kids, and then all the way up to Perfect Dark, which is an M-rated spy thriller first person shooter.
Yeah, and then you
Uh,
have Jet Force Gemini that kind of combines shooter and platform, which
right,
hadn't
right.
really been done.
No, that was definitely the first real successful third person kind of action platformer shooter kind of game, I think.
Yeah.
It had like the elements of like collecting things like there are other platforms like Banjo Kazooie and like Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong 64 had. Um, but overall, like it just an amazing. The gameplay itself is just so good, and you would never think it's like because it's you'd think oh it's so tedious because you have to collect all these different items every level, and it oh but like they did such unique things with each level. The level design was amazing,
Oh
and
yeah.
it every level like this is the time the N64 where levels couldn't be that big because obviously they only had a certain amount of space on the cartridge, so they couldn't make these huge gigantic levels, but every level felt like an adventure. Like it was like it felt huge. Like especially the second level in the island level in Banjo Kazooie. I forget the name of it.
No, not Gangplank Galleon. No, Gangplank Galleon is in Donkey Kong 64, which is
Yeah,
also a
that's
great
Donkey
one.
Kong. Yeah.
Um,
Um, but like it's huge. The level's gigantic for an N64 game. It was like
yeah.
you know, uh, and Mario 64 has some decent sized levels, but again, that came out like way earlier in the N64's life cycle because it was a launch title. So, it came out in Japan in '96,
Yeah.
and Banjo Kazooie came out in '98. So, they had that extra little amount of time to kind of refine the craft and really push the limits of the N64, the
Yeah.
hardware.
Yeah, and also like the thing that really ties it together is the music.
Oh yeah,
Like we haven't even gotten to talk about the plot, which is the reason why on paper this is just weird and should not exist. Um, but the music was by Grant Kirkhope, and
Mhm.
he did a lot of the Rare stuff, and
Yes.
also Tim Stamper was one of the main artists too, as well
Uh,
as Steve Mails, John
oh,
Nash, Kevin Bayliss. These are the people that I've got up here. Miles was
mhm.
good, and also Tim Stamper's brother Chris also produced this. So like it was a very tiny team,
Hmm. Oh
and a
yeah,
lot of them went on to go to make Ukulele, which could be another episode. But there's just so much
oh yeah.
stuff where like these guys, they
I mean,
like
uh,
they're such innovators in the gaming industry, and they're rarely spoken about, and it's
I think
just a
we should
shame.
definitely talk about ukulele a little bit because I think ukulele really is the Banjo Kazooie that never was. It
Yeah, but
was
I think we should talk about that a little bit later. Let's keep it on
okay.
just Banjo Kazooie. So like the music is just whimsical the whole time, and every level
Yeah,
has it gives the level its own flavor.
I would like to.
Even like
But
and it works with the design too.
yeah,
Like it's
from
bouncy or it's gloomy if it has to be.
from a sound design standpoint, what Grant Kirkhope was able to do with the score, where it changes like the basic the tempo and the motif is the same throughout, but
Yes,
every
it's
little
the
area you go through.
well, the motif is the teddy bear's picnic.
Yes, yeah, yeah, almost. It's not the same exact,
It's
but yes, you're
no, but
right.
it's very similar.
Right.
Like all of the I want to say the root notes are
Hmm.
all teddy bear's picnic.
Yes. Um, and it kind of it's almost like an old school cartoon feel where it like, everywhere you go, the music really follows you. It like works with everything you're doing. But then
Yeah.
also like it changes. So like, you'll be walking around and then you go in the water and the music changes, makes it like seem like it's more underwater, but it keeps the same
Right,
tempo.
like
There's
it
like
gets a good use of the xylophone.
a seamless transition between, different areas with the music. Um, so that was a really innovative thing that I think really hadn't been done too much up until that point. Like I think Banjo Kazooie is really the first one to have like a dynamic music that changed as you went from area to area seamlessly.
Yeah, that's the only I can't think of anything else that really happened like that.
Not at that time,
Unless it was
definitely.
no, I don't think so at all. Like it either would drastically change from one track to another, but there
Right,
would never be like it would never be along the same lines, and you would just suddenly get that setting.
right.
Like the ambience just worked, and like you'd hear the little bubbles blooping if you went
Hmm.
underwater and everything.
Yeah,
Even the sound effects, because like one of my favorite things about the game is that like there's no voice actors
yeah,
really. It's just like you get the dialogue on the screen, and it's like all these weird noises, and everybody
yeah.
has their own on thing. Like it's like ah ooh, ah ooh, ah
Yeah,
ah ooh,
yeah.
ah.
Uh, I also like how everything has like is personified. Like literally the stupidest items will talk to you. Like and they'll
Oh
have
yeah,
little eyeballs and a mouth and stuff. Like anything. It's like the whole world is anthropomorphized, and I think it's pretty funny. And I mean it's very classic cartoon, you know, old school like Looney Tunes, feel to it.
yeah. Well, I mean, even the moves that Banjo has with Kazooie is
Hmm.
like are very cartoonish. Like he'll
Yeah.
shoot like she shoots eggs out of
Right.
her beak and he holds her like a shotgun. That's in the second one. In the first one, she
Yeah.
just shoots it out of the backpack. Kazooie
Yeah.
mostly stays in the backpack the entire time.
Yeah.
And then you could transform into other things when you go to Mumbo Jumbo. He's like a shaman dude.
Hmm.
And you meet. Okay, so let's get to the plot of this game as to why it shouldn't exist on paper. So
Yeah.
Banjo is a bear. Kazooie is a weird bird thing called they call a breagle. Kazooie lives in his backpack, right?
Yeah.
So that's why they're Banjo Kazooie. It's Banjo and Kazooie. They're not married or friends, or I don't even know if they're friends. They don't seem to really like each other that much either. They're always picking on each other.
Yeah.
And like Kazooie's like it's kind of like I'll meet my wife, the old ball and chain kind of thing, but like there's no like I don't know. It's a weird
It's very much
dynamic.
like it's like an Abbott and
It's
Costello
yes,
kind of dynamic where
yes.
like they just they're
They
like partners.
coexist.
They coexist, but they always fight each other, like an odd couple kind of thing.
Yeah. So anyway, so one fine day, one fine day, Banjo and Kazooie are trotting along, and they're hanging out with his sister Tootie, who is also a bear,
Yeah.
and they're hanging out with Bottles the mole, who is a mole that wears glasses, and they live on Spiral Mountain in like a shanty, and there's a wit and overlooking Spiral Mountain is the mountain, but like living in the mountain is a witch, and it's her witch's lair, and the mountain of course looks like her face, and the witch's name is Gruntilda.
And and she's like the most stereotypical witch, the green
Yeah,
skin, the pointed hat, the black robes, like the Wicked Witch of the West, essentially.
yeah,
It's that archetype of a witch.
yeah, and so like Tootie's young, and I guess she's pretty. I don't know how. There's no age limit on like we don't really know how old they are. So like Tootie could be 8 or Tootie could be like 17 or
30.
whatever or 30. I don't know. Um, and like Gruntilda's like I want to be hot. Like
Yeah.
Gruntilda's like she's not like she's very overweight. She's a witch. She's not
She's
good
got
looking.
warts.
She's gross, right?
Yeah, she's got warts and green skin.
Yeah, and she has like her henchman. What's his name? Kronkle. No, not Kronk. Kronk was Emperor's New Groove's henchman.
Yeah.
Um, Starts with a K, I think.
Yeah, it's something like Crunk or Kronk or something. It's like a
It's
stereotypical like orc or ogre name. Like just like
yeah,
a you know.
yeah. So anyway, she kidnaps Tootie, and like she's like, I'm gonna steal her, and then I'm gonna sap her like life force in this machine, and then I'm gonna be beautiful, and then like Banjo Kazooie have to save her, and like Bottles teaches them moves. How he learned these moves, I don't know. That's never explained to us. But yeah, that's the game. So they have to traverse all these different stages, and like so that they can get to Gruntilda to save her. And they also meet
Yeah.
these cool little rainbow colored guys, which are there's five in every episode of the many things that you collect in this game. Like
Jinjos.
yes, the Jinjos, and they're a lot of fun. And they're like trapped, and like when you free them, they like spin around you, and then they go Jinjo.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they like form a super Jinjo, and they like destroy Gruntilda if you beat in the game.
Yeah.
It's a pretty epic last boss battle, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was hard for me like when I was a kid. I think I didn't beat her on like I remember I beat Banjo Tooie, the sequel, after before I had ever really beaten Banjo Kazooie.
Yeah. I mean, the difficulty definitely holds up to this day. It's
Yeah,
Nintendo hard.
Yeah, it's still
Like,
a tough game. It's not it's not Ninja Gaiden by any means,
no,
but it's hard.
the learning curve is not steep. It's a very gradual learning curve. So they work you again. This goes back to the how good the level design is that they work you up to the more difficult stuff. You're not starting out like getting your ass kicked in the first 5 minutes. Like the first 2, 3, 4 levels are pretty easy, and then it gets a little harder and a little harder, and then there's more like challenging stuff that you have to do and stuff. I think what was it? Was TikTok Woods the one where it's like different seasons you go to? That was a pretty hard level.
Yeah, that's the one that I don't like. I think it's Click Clock
change
Wood.
the season. Yeah, Click Clock Wood.
That's the only level that I really didn't like.
And you had to change the seasons like before you went in, and it was like there was different puzzles you had to solve in the different seasons.
The dynamic was cool, but in in Donkey Kong 64, they kind of borrowed that for like the fungi level, like the fungi forest. It was very similar to that.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say that level was inspired by it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the plot of Banjo Kazooie, and it's like it's just amazing. It's an amazing little game, and like you have to transform into different animals too. I liked the snow level, Freeze Easy Peak, because you have to race the wall. Wait, is it a walrus you have to race?
I believe it is a walrus. No, you turn into a walrus.
That's right. No, you race a walrus in Diddy Kong Racing. That's right. You have to race the polar bear.
Yes, yeah, and you turn into Mumbo turns you into a walrus or a seal or something.
Yeah, but like you have to collect like these voodoo pieces because like Mumbo Jumbo's a voodoo shaman.
Yeah,
and you gotta like jump and you jump on the thing and like he transforms you.
Yeah,
but I love that game.
Yeah, it is really it's a great game. It's amazing. I never played Banjo Tooie when I was a kid. I may have played it a couple times as an adult, at like a friend's house or something, but I never played it as a kid. And I want to. I want to go back to it. I just,
I might
just
play it
haven't
again.
done it.
I still have. I think I still have both of them. I know I still have Banjo Kazooie for Nintendo 64.
I definitely have still of Kazooie, and I've played
I still
it
have Tooie, but I'm not
so
sure.
many times over the years. It's such a great game.
Yeah. So Banjo Kazooie. We'll get to the sequels too. And like it's kind of like the first sequel was great, and I never played the Game Boy Color ones.
I
never played Nuts and Bolts, which is which we'll get to that, but a lot of people have just ruled it out as a disaster.
Well, it was universally panned.
Yeah.
JonTron actually did a very good comprehensive episode on the history of because when he did Nuts and Bolts, he did like a whole episode of like the Banjo Kazooie, the history of Banjo Kazooie, And and there was actually an episode of Did You Know Gaming on Banjo Kazooie about and when again JonTron narrated it, and it was going into like the whole like history of Banjo Kazooie, what was like going on, like if Banjo there was actually a Banjo 3E in development for the GameCube, and then when after Microsoft purchased Rare, it kind of like got thrown out the window, and eventually became Nuts and Bolts, which was unfortunately not a good game.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think if it had not been called Banjo Kazooie, it might have had a chance.
Yeah,
But
I
it
think
didn't.
the fans were really clamoring for a classic Banjo Kazooie game.
Yeah, I
And
have a rule for that, and I forgot what it's called. If I can remember it, like it's one of those things where like if you just named it something, that's what it is. It's the Saint Anger rule. So like
oh
Metallica's
yeah,
Saint Anger is not a good album, but if it was a side project and it like wasn't called, it wasn't under the Metallica banner, it probably would have been okay. Kind of like
oh,
Lulu. Like if I think if
yeah.
it wasn't under, I think if it wasn't like if it didn't have Metallica's name on it, I think people would have accepted it a little bit better.
Well, yeah, or Risk, Megadeth's Risk. I think
That
if it was
too.
just it was
If it
just Dave Mustaine Risk, then it would have been, I think, fine. He probably would have been way better because
Yeah, or if it
yeah,
was just under the MD50 thing, it would have
yeah,
been fine.
yeah.
But
Um,
but the other funny thing about Banjo Kazooie is it almost never happened too, because this was
mhm,
it originally started as a game called Project Dream or just Dream, I believe it was
mhm,
called, or like Dream Pirate Adventures or something like that.
yeah,
And Banjo, and so like the character for Banjo can like there was no bear. It was like just like a person who kind of looks like Rufio
mhm,
from a Hook, and you were like this little like indigenous kid who was running around like, and he had a dog too. He had a little dog, and he
mhm,
was like running around like you were collecting things. And there was also a dinosaur's foot that would randomly like start stomping, and you'd have to like avoid it. And like I guess you would fight pirates at some point or whatever. You were on this island that looked kind of like Kong Isle, like Jungle Japes, and
yeah,
it was originally planned for the Super Nintendo, and they were using the same engine that they had used for Donkey Kong Country, and because that console was on its way out, it was like right before it was like about a year or two before the N64 would have been released, which kind of took away from what was going to be.
mhm,
And they looked at it and they said, well, there's no point in like coming out with this game because it's going to get shelved. It might like it'll probably get shelved, and like it's not going to there's no point in it's not going to sell because this console's on its way out. We
yeah,
have to like let's put it on the back burner. We won't do it. We're going to have to scrap this, and we'll start working on something for the new console. And then eventually they kind of like use certain elements from the band from Project Dream, and they kind of like morphed it into Banjo Kazooie in a weird way.
mhm, yeah,
Like
um,
I think it was the same team of developers that were working
yeah,
on
it
it, and
was.
they kind of like, and then they just said, let's take pieces from that idea, and let's like do that. So like the indigenous kid had like, he had like a vest, and that kind of became the backpack,
Mhm.
and like
The
somehow
shorts were the same too.
yeah, the shorts were the same, and like he wore like feathers, and that eventually became Kazooie. It's a weird. I don't know how they came up with this or how they like turned one into the other, but that's what they did. Yeah, Banjo also wears pants. That
Yeah,
is, and he does also play a banjo in the beginning, and they had like that weird little like the theme song is cool too.
oh yeah, it was amazing. It was
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah, I'll put the theme song on. Why not? Let's see if the good people can get a
Yeah.
little bit of nostalgia. Banjo and Kazooie are also great. They're also a really good character in Super Smash Ultimate.
Oh my God, they're so
They're
good.
pretty OP, but
Yeah,
they're not super OP. They're not
I
like Fox was for like the older for like Melee.
Oh yeah, or Cloud is pretty broken too.
Yeah, I haven't played with Sephiroth yet.
I haven't either, and I from what I've seen, based on just like the trailer alone, Sephiroth looks pretty broken. Um, I feel like a little bit Smash Ultimate is kind of pay to win because a lot of the DLC characters are really really good.
Yeah. All right, so here's the theme song. Let me just put this up for you.
All right, hold on.
Oh, this is the intro.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Fly gets dead. This is really hard to play on guitar, by the way.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
You have to chicken pick.
Yeah. You can't see me, but I'm dancing. There's Mumbo on the sax.
And then on the xylophone.
He's a very talented shaman. And the violin!
Yeah.
And he does parlor tricks, too.
Yeah. Again, very classic, like, cartoony theme song.
Who's playing the drums?
Gruntilda. It's Gruntilda stomping around, pissed off that they're out there playing music in her front yard.
Sure. Or Crunch, or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
What a great game. Alright.